Welcome back to the Wolverine.com podcast. I'm John Borton, and we're here with a fellow traveler to Indianapolis for the Big Ten football meetings. That would, of course, be Tom Crawford, founder of the Crawford Podcasting Network. You'll hear him on Press Pass with Jack Ebling. He's all over the place, and in the last couple of days, he was soaking it all in at Lucas Oil Stadium. Tom Crawford, welcome back to the podcast.
Well, great to be back, JB and Anthony. I tell you what, it's like, I always use a kid in the candy store. I'm just a college football nerd. I just absorb everything. I'll go talk to one of the players at Rutgers who's got nobody in front of him just to get his perspective of what it's like to hang out in Piscataway. I mean, I think the Big Ten does a terrific job in giving media access to this event. Some people think it's just coach speak and players speak and softball questions the media is throwing at them, but I really just get a lot out of it. It was 2 days that went really fast. I was really tired. Got home at 10-1 after having dinner in Indy with some fellow media people. But you know how much I enjoyed that event, JB, as do you.
No doubt about it. I really like the format they have at Lucas Oil. I like that setup. I mean, I do miss a little bit the old days where everybody was around individual tables. Yes,
yeah.
And you
remember
can
the Brady Hoke and Lloyd Carr, and
absolutely.
That was like you were in a vacuum.
Yeah,
and there were no rule. I mean, it's so different.
I will say there are far more people there now. I think. And so I kind of understand that they do it the way they do it, but it's I do long for the days of moving from table to table and sometimes catching people one-on-one at a table. So anyway, I obviously a ton of information coming out of this. I give credit to our own staff, our producer Anthony Broom, and also Clayton Safey, and of course everyone knows the little ball of hate, Mr. Ballast, that makes it all happen.
He looks intense, man.
Oh
he looks like a Mike linebacker out there who's just ready to just tackle the world.
Yeah, he's got the perma scowl, and that's when football season is almost here. So anyway, we want to get right into it. We were talking about the questions that are asked and the topics. One of the ones that drew some interest was a question from Mr. Tom Crawford to head coach Jim Harbaugh, and I would, there are questions that Jim embraces. There are questions that he somewhat abruptly rejects, and then there are some topics that he doesn't seem interested in talking about. I would say that the schedule question right now is one that he kind of stiff arms, and when you brought that up to him, you got the famous Harbaugh pause.
Yeah,
I've gotten it. Angelique Changelis has got it. Hey,
me.
I know, but I'm just saying that you are certainly not alone in that. Talk about your feelings about this schedule. And I know we don't necessarily see eye to eye on it, but I want to start off with that one.
Well, first of all, let me preface what I feel when I go to an event like that or any of this media stuff. I feel like I'm a liaison from the Michigan fan base to the player, the access that I have that they don't have, to the players and to the head coach. Okay.
Sure.
And I feel an obligation every time I ask a question, and I don't ask a ton of questions because I'm a sponge in that regard. And I feel the writers who got to crank out more stuff than I do should have more access to that, because you guys are going nuts over there with your fingertips. But I wanted to know from a fan's perspective, these next two seasons, 2023, 2024, here Michigan's coming off a Big Ten title, a CFP, that they don't have a Power 5 team on that schedule. And all I was asking, once again, not to be antagonistic, are we going to go back to that trend of having that on with Oklahoma and Texas? And so I got the stare down that I've gotten stare downs from from Lloyd Carr. The stare down, the Lloyd Carr stare down blows Jim Harbaugh's out of the water, out of the water. Nothing compares to that. But I wanted to find out, basically, where this was going, because I think it's an insult to the Michigan fan. I'm not talking about the people that cherry pick tickets off StubHub. I'm talking about they have to pay the royalty fees. You have to commit to those 8 home games. The money that goes into that they get, Colorado State and Hawaii and UConn, the worst team probably in college football. And then next year you get East Carolina, UNLV, and Bowling Green. An 85-degree, it's hot out there. You're going to sit there. What are you going to learn about your team? You always talk about things. Yeah, we got to clean some things up. We found out some things in this game. We learned from this game playing against this team. Ryan Day talked about we're going to learn a lot about ourselves playing Notre Dame in the opener. What's Michigan going to learn prior to the Big Ten slate of playing those teams? In all due respect, group of 5. That's my son coaching the group of 5, but I don't care. I'm this from a Michigan perspective, and I just think it's an insult and unfair to the Michigan fans that they have to, that's all. They don't even get one group of. They don't get a Power 5, guys, until 2026, as it stands right now, when Texas comes to town. That's not good.
So let me play devil's advocate. I think they can learn plenty from those early games. I think that I don't know that Michigan has to necessarily apologize for the schedules that it has put out under Harbaugh, and in recent years, you're talking Washington, you're talking Notre Dame.
I wasn't saying that, though.
I know, but you're talking about the problems with the schedule these 2 years.
Yeah.
These 2 years, I'd say that's more of the aberration than not. You've got Texas and Oklahoma in the future. You've also got an era in which, I've seen plenty of national championships won with that type of non-conference schedule. And I just I don't know that you need a 50-50 game in those openers anymore. And I've had this discussion with others for years. I just I'm okay with this schedule. What I think you can learn, you're certainly going to learn about how those defensive players, the new guys that they're plugging in, how they move, how they operate. They're going to get a feel for the game. No, you're probably not going to have a fourth quarter game in those first 3.
Yeah.
But I don't think that necessarily rules out a strong performance in what I think will be a fourth quarter game, and that Iowa game.
Yeah,
that's the one.
JB, okay, so your first exposure to a fourth quarter game is a critical, and highly critical game at Iowa City. If you lose that game, you're done. Okay. The problem is when you don't have a quality win in the non-conference, that means you have to run the slate. You have to pitch a perfect game to get to the CFP. Because if you don't have any equity build up in a quality win in the non-conference, and you lose to an Iowa, you lose to Michigan State, a Penn State, and obviously an Ohio State, where's your equity? You didn't prove anything, and that's just part of the equation. Let alone you want to compete against the best you don't find out anything, John, playing against that level of competition. You're going to get more competitiveness in practice than you are against the Michigan defense, that offense, than you're going to get against those teams. Okay, that's all I'm saying. And for Jim to insinuate. Go talk to Ward Manuel the way he closed that thing out. And I don't care about awkward moments, okay, because they're compelling, okay? Go talk to Ward Manuel. You mean to tell me Jim Harbaugh has no impact on scheduling? All of a sudden, Ward says, hey, Jim, here's what we're going to play in 2022, okay? No, that's not how it works. I think contractually, that's part of his job description is to have input on scheduling. So that's all I'm saying is that there should be, for the commitment, financial commitment, in these highly inflationary times, that one quality opponent comes in there, and pays homage to the fans for their commitment, financial commitment, to watch the Michigan Wolverines at the Big House.
I hear you. My only pushback on that I think if Michigan has a strong performance at Iowa, which it well could, regardless. And if it goes into Columbus with 0 losses or 1 loss, people aren't going to care anymore. I mean, they'll be riding high,
If that
and
happens,
those season ticket holders, absolutely.
that's a big if.
That's what every season comes down to. You either win big, or else you got people that are unhappy. That's why you had Ryan Day getting up at the podium saying, well, we didn't do what we wanted to do. We were 11-2, but it wasn't good enough, and all that
Right.
kind of thing. So, it's big boy ball, as Brady Hoke would have said. So anyway, let's move on from that one. I want to. There was so much that came out in this, and one of the things, in answer to a question by our own Anthony Broom, thank you very much, was Jim Harbaugh saying that the Wolverines have a freshman, unnamed at this point, who will be a gift from the football gods. And I want to know who you think that might be. We as a staff decided on who we think it's going to be. Your thoughts?
You're talking about Grant? What freshman are you talking about?
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Who you thought?
Well, I don't know that.
About.
I don't know the depth of that. Darius Clemens is the guy that I think is going to have impact. But I think Ballas, is that the kid, the young man who had a sub 540?
Kenneth Grant, yes.
Kenneth Grant, and he's a big dude, and he's a Georgia-esque kind of player, if you know what I mean, which is so needed. And so when I saw Chris make that post, I think that was, I don't know, Tuesday and everything. I mean, that got my attention. Because that's the kind of guy they need.
No doubt.
To muck it up inside and to be disruptive, which is going to be, because I think there's going to be a big void. I mean, I had literally a one-on-one and walking off with Kirk Ferentz, who I love, and he, I just asked him, or actually, no, it was James Franklin walking off, because I talked to both of them walking off. James Franklin, I asked him about the Michigan game and what they pose, the threat, or what caused that loss and everything. And I think he might have even said this in the scrum to everybody else, since those two DNs, okay, those two DNs rocked that game, and they flipped the game. David Ojabo, Aiden Hutchinson. So I'm thinking to myself, good Lord, they got to make up for those voids, because all these coaches were talking about those two dudes on the ends as being disruptive, and we know Ohio State was victim of that as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And I do happen to think that Jim was talking about Kenneth Grant, and the reason for that is Darius Clemens was my first thought.
That was mine too.
But then you think about it, he's known about Darius Clemens for months now, and this just came out. And he had talked to Bruce Feldman earlier in the day and dropped that name that he was very excited about. Kid that's 349 pounds and runs a sub 5.0.
That's crazy. That's
40.
Crazy.
Yeah. And so I think this is the newest thing that he's thinking about. And I'm very anxious to see. It is a strong freshman class. He's mentioned that. You talked about the losses on defense. There are others that are mentioning that, and there are Michigan players and coaches who will give you some pushback on that. Jim Harbaugh himself, a couple of days ago, says, that the defense might be better than last year's. And when I mentioned to Mazi Smith, everybody thinks that the offense is loaded. The defense, you got to plug in some guys. Question marks there. Is that something that you concern yourself with? And he had an edge to him, like he might, as he lines up against some of the biggest interior linemen of the Big Ten. He said, keep doubting, just keep on doubting, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
He is convinced that this defense is going to be very, very good. And this is the time of year where you do that. But
well, he likes his team. I mean, and I remember last year, and last year, it was about half as many people, and it just, because we're just coming off COVID, and it was this new concept. but he seemed really confident about that team. He seems really confident about this team. He talks about overall both sides of the ball. This team is better than the team was last year at this time. Okay,
Mhm.
and he also said this team is better than the one that finished against Georgia. Okay, so those are strong statements because that's what a heck of a good team last year. It wasn't, it wasn't national championship caliber team, but it was at least they were in the hunt. Big gap there between them and Georgia. So I like that confidence, and I think he gets defensive about his defense, no pun intended. And
Mhm.
that got my attention as well. So, but one thing that I'm going to segue into the other takeaway from the 4 players I talked to, not necessarily Jim, is the thing that from my perspective, living up here a mile from campus, is the high priority of the Michigan State game. Eric All, Kay McNamara, they all said, Mozzie said it, DJ Turner, we got to beat Michigan State. That's a non-negotiable thing in their mind. They've got to beat Michigan State. So no dancing around that game, no being smug about that game or indifferent about that game. They had a Michigan State mentality about the Michigan State game like I've never seen before. That got my attention. It got me smile from ear to ear.
All right. Well, you know that that is going to be a game that you circle. You have not beaten Mel Tucker as yet. I Michigan State came into that setting in Indianapolis with a certain amount of swagger. They were as bad or worse as Michigan 2 years ago, despite the fact that they came into Michigan Stadium and beat the Wolverines. But then they come up with a big year last year, and still finish what, third in the Big Ten East.
Yeah, but a
I'm
top 10 team. Yeah.
the top 10 team. I think they're going to have their hands full ever winning the Big Ten East. With if Michigan stays the way it is, has been, if Ohio State continues to be what it is, if you got Penn State, we'll see. But I will say this: um, the attitude that you're talking about can do nothing but help the Wolverines. I think a lot of people want to play it off as Michigan State little brother,
Yeah.
this and that. And that can't be the attitude that's going on inside Schembechler Hall. No question.
No. 2 guys got my attention yesterday. Ryan Day and Mel Tucker. Michigan needs to fear Mel Tucker. I'm telling you what, he's taken recruiting, he's taken interpersonal relationships with media. He's hired his own private PR firm to build relationships with the media. He's trying to take his program to an SEC level. Okay. And he's got a culture in there of getting kids that want to play on blacktop. Okay. So, I actually beg to differ with you into thinking that Michigan, and I disdain Michigan State. I don't like Michigan State.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You know that. And people say, oh, you're a Sparty fanny patter. No, I'm just seeing reality. You need to fear this dude. Okay. You need to, I'm saying that wholeheartedly. He's got
Yeah.
the portal thing down to a science, and his recruiting class he's beating Michigan right now, and he's 2-0 against Harbaugh. That game, I'm so glad it's a priority. It's more important to me, to this program, that 29th, that's the number 1 game on the schedule. You have
All
to
right.
protect home more than the Ohio State game.
And I'm going to say that you don't need to fear him, but you need to answer him far more forcefully than you have. 2 games, Michigan against Mel Tucker teams. You had an absolute an abomination of a game 2 years ago when you couldn't defend the deep pass, and you hadn't undergone the defensive changes, and you didn't have the offense you have now. You didn't have a quarterback who could get it done. And last year you kind of got you played a competitive game, but you got the East Lansing curse down the stretch. I think that Michigan can and will answer more forcefully. I don't think they need to be fearful,
Well,
but they need to get after it.
fearful's not. I mean, they got to respect and they got to take notice. You need to compete. And
Yeah.
the best rivalries in college football are in-state rivalries. Okay, the
Mm-hmm.
fans got to deal with the water cooler warriors, whether you work in a corporate environment, whether you work in a factory, whatever you're dealing with, or in the driveway with a guy across the street. That's why it's most important. You're not dealing with Ohio State people. Okay, you gotta take care of that in-state rivalry, and it's. I'm just saying. I am totally impressed. Mel Tucker is hosting 200 former Michigan State players at his house. He's building relationships. He's doing the whole thing, and he's doing it in recruiting. Okay, and I'm not saying I mean, barbecue at the big house thing is coming up. That's a big one for Michigan, recruiting wise. But if Michigan's going to at best finish 15th in recruiting, from the experts tell us, coming off a Big Ten title and CFP berth, something's wrong with that. You have to fix that. You should be in the top 5.
All right, and the fix starts, and the pushback against any notion of Mel Tucker as the next Jim Tressel of the Big Ten starts with Ohio State having them down by 7 touchdowns at halftime, and Michigan more forcefully taking charge of that game and putting Michigan State in its place come mid-October. So points taken. We hear you, but I still think that there's a whole lot to be written of that.
I hear you.
In the words of Mark D'Antoni, it's not over. Let's talk about Cade for a few minutes. Cade McNamara, he seemed very self-possessed and in charge, very calm in his interview sessions. I like the way this kid carries himself on the field, off the field. I'm glad that the excellent non-conference schedule Michigan has will allow for both quarterbacks to play extreme amounts. But your thoughts on what you saw out of Cade down in Indianapolis?
Well, tough with the caliber of these quarterbacks, and Jim Harbaugh talks about Cade should be worried about JJ should be worried about Cade. He talks about it that this quarterback thing is a 50-50, but at the same time, but Cade's my starter. He's a starting quarterback. Okay, so obviously he declared that. You heard that.
Yep.
So going in, he's on the inside lane running the Kentucky Derby. Okay, so that being said, I don't think you're going to really gain once again against this competition. You're gonna learn about a lot about the quarterback play. I think you learn that more in the fire against better competition. But I hope that JJ is not going to get this 20% of participation. But I was impressed with Cade. I'm with you. He's an impressive guy, and Michigan's not going to bring. Michigan's got a bunch of impressive guys that could have gone there. I thought he handled it well. He doesn't seem to acknowledge JJ as much as I thought he would. He kind of just brushes off that and just talks about himself as a quarterback. And I think it's a couple of coaches indicated that they want their number one competitor on their team to be their quarterback. And I think Cade is about as competitive as you get. He wants to compete. And so I guess maybe that works for him. But I think they can't go wrong with either one of these guys. But I just hope number 9 gets an opportunity, more opportunity than he did last year, and see if maybe that's the better option.
Well, I think he will. And the good news is you have the Big Ten championship winning starting quarterback back, and you have someone that the head coach says will push him and that Cade will have to beat out for the starting job. So, that's nothing but good for this team, I believe. Tom Crawford, we could do this until midnight tonight, just about what happened in Indianapolis. We will have plenty to talk about.
We'll do sequels. We'll do a sequel next week.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I appreciate you. You know what? Let's do it again very soon. But thanks for joining us today.
Well, I appreciate JB. Camp opens next week for the Wolverines on the 3rd and everybody else, and cannot wait for college football to begin.